As Vice President J.D. Vance earlier today at Fort Campbell, which happens to sit in a bright red congressional district in Tennessee, where a special congressional election is being held next Tuesday. That district, the Tennessee 7th, voted for Trump just last year by 22 points. Matt Van Epps, leading Democrat Afton Bain by only 2% among likely voters.
Republicans are reportedly abandoning ship at an accelerating rate, and what's happening in deep red districts could signal that Trump's entire party recognizes the midterm elections are heading toward catastrophe. We're not talking about 1 or 2 retirements in competitive districts. We're talking about what sources suggest might be a pattern of Republicans in safe Trump territory deciding they'd rather quit than face voters while defending his policies. A congressional race in Tennessee that Trump won by 22 points is suddenly polling within 2 percentage points. A longtime Republican congressman from Florida just announced retirement after 20 years. Senator Joni Ernst in deep red Iowa is reportedly not seeking re-election. And most dramatically, a Republican gubernatorial candidate in Minnesota withdrew from the race with a scathing statement condemning Trump's ICE operations as unconstitutional attacks on American citizens. When Republicans in the safest possible districts are fleeing rather than defending Trump, when politicians who should be coasting to re-election are deciding retirement beats campaigning, that might reveal they see something in internal polling or constituent feedback that terrifies them about November. And if the exodus continues, Speaker Johnson's already razor-thin majority could evaporate before midterms even happen. But before we break down how Republican retirements could accelerate their midterm losses, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to explain what it means when safe-seat Republicans would rather quit than defend Trump through another campaign. That's why we built John Brown's show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually connects Republican panic to the political disasters they're trying to escape, hit that subscribe button right now, because what's driving these retirements could determine whether Republicans even have functioning majority by the time November arrives. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what these retirements might actually reveal about Republican prospects, because this isn't normal political turnover where some members retire for personal reasons or term limits. Sources suggest this could be something more concerning for the party. When you have Republicans in districts Trump won overwhelmingly deciding they don't want to run again, that indicates they might believe association with Trump has become electoral liability even in his strongest territories. When longtime members with seniority and committee positions choose to leave rather than campaign on Trump's record, that suggests the political environment has deteriorated so badly that even safe seats feel unsafe. And when candidates explicitly cite Trump's policies as reasons for withdrawing, as allegedly happened in Minnesota, you're seeing fractures in the coalition that could grow into complete collapse if Trump's approval continues declining. The question becomes whether these retirements are just individuals making personal decisions or whether they represent broader recognition among Republicans that defending Trump through midterms could destroy political careers. Let's start with what's happening in Florida, because sources suggest 3 Republican members have now announced they're not seeking re-election. That's not random coincidence. That might indicate something systematic about how Florida Republicans view their prospects or their willingness to continue serving under current political conditions. Reports indicate Representative Vern Buchanan, who's represented Florida's 16th district for 20 years, announced his retirement. That's significant because 20-year members don't typically leave unless they have compelling reasons beyond just wanting a change. Think about what Buchanan's statement reveals. He allegedly talked about serving constituents and fighting for working families and ensuring opportunity remains available. Standard political language, but the timing might tell a different story. Why retire now specifically? Why not serve one more term and then leave? Sources suggest the answer could be that Buchanan looks at the political environment, sees Trump's declining approval, recognizes the policies are increasingly unpopular, and calculates that defending all of it through a midterm campaign isn't worth whatever legislative achievements might be possible in his final term. And Buchanan reportedly isn't alone. Sources indicate Representative Neil Dunn from Florida's 2nd District also announced he's not seeking re-election, That's two longtime Florida Republicans deciding 2026 is the year to exit. And there might be a third depending on how you count retirements announced in recent months. When multiple members from the same state reach the same conclusion about leaving, that suggests they're responding to similar political pressures or similar assessments of what defending Trump will require. But here's what makes Florida retirements particularly significant. Trump lives in Florida. Mar-a-Lago is his base of operations. Florida Republicans should theoretically be most aligned with Trump's priorities and most comfortable defending his agenda. If they can't or won't do that, if even Florida Republicans are uncomfortable enough to retire rather than campaign for him, what does that say about Republicans in states where Trump is less popular? These retirements shrink Republican majority even before midterm elections. Speaker Johnson started with slim margin. Every retirement creates vacancy that takes time to fill through special elections. And during that vacancy period, Democrats effectively have more leverage because Republicans have fewer votes to spare on controversial legislation. If retirements continue, Johnson might lose effective control before voters even go to polls in November. But if you want to see evidence that Trump's problems extend beyond just retirement decisions, look at what's reportedly happening in Tennessee's 7th District, because sources suggest a special election that should be Republican landslide is suddenly competitive in ways that might terrify the party about November. Reports indicate Trump won this district by 22 points just last year. That's not close. That's overwhelming dominance. This is deep red Trump country where Republicans should coast to victory. Yet polling allegedly shows the Republican candidate leading by only 2 percentage points. 2 points in a district Trump won by 22. Think about what that shift might represent. Either Democratic enthusiasm has surged dramatically, or Republican support has collapsed, or both. Any of those scenarios should alarm Republicans heading into midterms because if Trump districts are becoming competitive, no seat is actually safe. And there's reportedly another element that makes this particularly concerning for Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance allegedly visited the district to campaign for the Republican candidate. That's the vice president making personal appearance in what should be safe district. You don't deploy VP to shore up races you think you'll win comfortably. You deploy VP when you're worried about losing and need high-profile support to prevent disaster. The fact that Vance reportedly went to Tennessee suggests Republicans might be genuinely concerned about losing what should be an unlosable race. Think about what happens if Democrats win Tennessee's 7th district. That would send shockwave through Republican Party. If they can't hold Trump plus 22 districts, what districts can they hold? Suddenly, every Republican member, even in relatively safe seats, has to worry about whether they're vulnerable. That kind of panic creates behavior like the retirements we're seeing. Members deciding they'd rather exit on their own terms than risk humiliating defeat in races they thought were secure. Many sources even suggest the Tennessee race might be canary in coal mine for broader midterm dynamics. If polling shows this kind of swing in deep red districts, if Democrats are competitive in territories they shouldn't even contest seriously, that indicates something fundamental has shifted in electorate. Possibly Trump's declining approval, possibly backlash against controversial policies, possibly exhaustion with constant chaos. Whatever the cause, the effect could be catastrophic Republican losses across the board. But perhaps the most politically significant retirement might be Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa, reportedly announcing she won't seek re-election in 2026. Because Iowa Senate seats don't come up often, and losing Ernst could flip control of the Senate depending on other race outcomes. Sources suggest Ernst made cryptic statement about everyone having to die eventually before announcing her decision. That's unusual framing for retirement announcement. Typically, politicians talk about spending time with family or pursuing other opportunities, not mortality and prayer and reflection. Think about what might drive that kind of statement. Ernst could be exhausted by the political environment, could be facing pressure from Trump to support policies she's uncomfortable with, could be looking at internal polling showing she's more vulnerable than expected, could be calculating that defending Trump through another campaign isn't worth the personal cost. Any of those explanations suggest serious problems for Republicans if even senators from safe states are deciding not to run again. And Iowa is allegedly deep red territory. Trump won Iowa comfortably. Ernst has been a popular figure in Republican politics. She shouldn't be vulnerable in normal circumstances. But sources suggest these aren't normal circumstances. Trump's approval might be declining enough that even Iowa Republicans worry about defending him. His policies could be unpopular enough that association becomes liability. The chaos could be exhausting enough that Ernst prefers retirement to continued participation. But there's reportedly another dimension. Ernst leaving creates open seat that Democrats could potentially compete for. Open seats are always more competitive than races with incumbents. Democrats might see opportunity to flip Iowa's Senate seat if they recruit strong candidate and Republican nominee is too aligned with unpopular Trump policies. That possibility, even if unlikely, creates additional pressure on Republicans to defend seat they thought was secure. Make sure you're subscribed because sources suggest there's pattern emerging across these retirements. They're not happening in competitive swing districts where members face tough re-election regardless. They're happening in safe Republican territory where members should be cruising to victory. The fact that they're choosing to leave suggests something about the political environment has become intolerable enough that even safe seats don't feel worth defending. And that pattern, if it continues, could devastate Republican recruitment and fundraising heading into the most important midterms of Trump's presidency. But the most damning retirement might not be from current office holder, but from Republican candidate who explicitly condemned Trump's policies as reason for withdrawing. Sources indicate Chris Medel, who was reportedly running for Minnesota governor, withdrew his candidacy with scathing statement about Trump's ICE operations. And what he allegedly said could become template for how Republicans distance themselves from Trump if they decide loyalty has become too costly. Reports suggest Medel said he cannot support the National Republicans' stated retribution against Minnesota citizens, that he can't count himself member of party that would conduct such operations, that ICE has expanded far beyond stated focus on public safety threats, that American citizens, particularly those of color, live in fear, that citizens are carrying papers to prove citizenship, that ICE is raiding homes using civil warrants signed only by Border Patrol agents without judicial oversight, that all of this is unconstitutional and wrong. Think about what that statement represents. A Republican candidate explicitly attacking Trump's signature policy as unconstitutional, condemning the party for targeting American citizens, calling out racial profiling, defending constitutional rights against federal overreach. That's not typical Republican messaging. That's someone breaking completely with Trump and doing it publicly with detailed critique of specific policies. And Medel reportedly framed his decision in moral terms, that he has to look his daughters in the eye and tell them he did what was right. That's powerful language suggesting Trump's policies cross ethical lines that Medel can't defend even for political advancement. When candidates would rather end political careers than be associated with what Trump is doing, that reveals how toxic the association has become for at least some Republicans. But sources suggest there's another element. Medel was reportedly leading Republican candidate for governor. This wasn't marginal figure making irrelevant statement. This was person who had real chance to win Republican nomination and then general election. His withdrawal potentially changes the entire Minnesota gubernatorial race by eliminating the Republican candidate most likely to win. That's significant political consequence, flowing from Trump's policies becoming so controversial that even safe Republicans can't defend them. Share this with everyone because what makes Medel's statement particularly damaging is that it gives permission structure for other Republicans. If prominent candidate can break with Trump over specific policies and frame it as moral necessity, other Republicans facing similar pressures might follow. The more that Republicans publicly condemn Trump's actions, the harder it becomes for remaining loyalists to claim everything is fine. The coalition starts fracturing in ways that could accelerate if Trump doesn't change course. But let's talk about the practical implications for Speaker Johnson's ability to govern. Because sources suggest the Republican House majority is already so narrow that additional vacancies could make passing legislation virtually impossible even before midterm elections. Reports indicate Republicans currently hold 218 to 213 advantage. That's 5-seat margin. Incredibly thin for trying to pass controversial legislation when your party has internal disagreements. and every retirement potentially shrinks that margin further. When a member announces retirement, they typically serve out their current term. But sometimes members leave early, creating vacancies that remain until special elections. Sources suggest Representative Doug LaMalfa's unexpected death already created one vacancy. If more retirements convert to early departures, Johnson could find himself with effectively no margin at all, unable to lose single Republican vote on any legislation. Think about what that means practically. Johnson needs to pass appropriations bills to fund government, needs to increase debt ceiling to avoid default, needs to pass Trump's legislative priorities. But if even 3 or 4 Republicans defect on any vote, legislation fails. And with members already uncomfortable enough to announce retirements, they might be more willing to vote their conscience on controversial bills since they're not facing re-election. That dynamic could paralyze Congress right when Trump needs legislative achievements to campaign on. But there's reportedly another element. The retirements might discourage potential Republican recruits for other races. When sitting members in safe districts are choosing to retire rather than defend Trump, why would quality candidates decide to run for open seats? Why would successful people risk their reputations and resources campaigning on unpopular agenda when even longtime members are abandoning the effort? That recruitment problem could compound into Democrats having better candidates in more districts, further increasing their chances of taking the House. And even worse, there's also financial implication. Republican donors might become more cautious about funding candidates if they see retirements as signal that party insiders think races are unwinnable. Why donate to campaigns that your own party members are fleeing? That could create fundraising disadvantage that makes Republican losses even more likely as Democrats potentially outspend them in competitive races. But step back and look at the broader pattern these retirements might reveal. Sources suggest this isn't just about individual decisions by particular members. This could be systematic recognition among Republicans that Trump's presidency has become untenable to defend, and association with it threatens political futures. When you see members across multiple states in different types of districts with varying degrees of seniority, all reaching similar conclusions about leaving, that indicates common cause rather than coincidence. Think about what Republicans considering retirement might be seeing in their own polling or hearing from constituents. Trump's approval declining to historic lows, his policies on immigration becoming deeply unpopular even among previous supporters, economic promises not delivering results, foreign policy chaos creating instability, and constant scandals and controversies that dominate news cycles instead of legislative achievements. When you combine all of that, campaigning on Trump's record might seem impossible to these members. And sources suggest there could be additional retirements that haven't been announced yet. Members might be waiting to see if political environment improves before making final decisions. But if Trump's approval continues declining, if controversies keep mounting, if polling keeps showing Republican vulnerability, more retirements could follow. That creates cascading effect where each new retirement makes others more likely by reinforcing perception that defending Trump is losing battle. But there's reportedly another element driving some retirements beyond just electoral calculations: exhaustion with the chaos. Sources suggest some members might simply be tired of constant crisis management, controversial statements, policy reversals, and internal party warfare that defines Trump's presidency. When serving in Congress becomes exercise in defending the indefensible rather than actually legislating, members might decide their talents and energy are better spent elsewhere. Share this video with everyone you know, because the retirements also create opportunity for Democrats. Every open Republican seat is potential pickup opportunity. Every retirement means no incumbent advantage. Every safe district that becomes competitive is resource drain for Republicans who have to defend territory they thought was secure. If Democrats play their cards right, these retirements could translate into multiple House seat flips that contribute to taking majority. So how is Trump likely to respond to this wave of retirements from members in his own party? Because sources suggest his typical pattern when facing political adversity is to attack critics and double down on controversial positions rather than moderating approach. And that response pattern could make the retirement problem worse rather than better if members see Trump refusing to adjust despite clear signals from his own coalition. Reports indicate Trump typically frames criticism as disloyalty. When Republicans break with him or question his decisions, he often attacks them publicly and encourages primary challenges. But that approach might not work with retirements. You can't primary someone who's already announced they're leaving. And attacking retiring members just reinforces their decision to exit by proving they were right that defending Trump has become impossible. Think about what Trump could do differently if he wanted to stop the retirement wave. He could moderate controversial policies that are driving members away, could acknowledge that some approaches aren't working politically, could give Republicans cover to distance themselves from least popular aspects of his agenda while maintaining overall support. But sources suggest that kind of strategic moderation isn't Trump's pattern. He typically demands total loyalty and views any criticism as betrayal, regardless of political consequences. And there's reportedly another dynamic. The more Republicans who leave, the more dependent Trump becomes on remaining members. But that increased dependence doesn't necessarily translate to increased power over them. If Republicans see colleagues fleeing and calculate their own vulnerability, they might be more willing to break ranks rather than less. The retirements could actually weaken Trump's hold on the party by demonstrating that disloyalty is option rather than political suicide. But sources suggest Trump faces impossible calculation. If he moderates to try retaining wavering members, he risks alienating his base that wants him to fight rather than compromise. If he doubles down to energize the base, he drives away members and voters who are already uncomfortable with his approach. There might not be political strategy available that solves both problems simultaneously. And that impossible position could be what's driving the retirements, as members recognize Trump can't or won't change course, even when doing so might save Republican majorities. So here's what this wave of Republican retirements reveals. Multiple members from safe Trump districts deciding they'd rather quit than defend his policies through another campaign. A Tennessee special election that Trump won by 22 points, now polling within 2 points. Senator Joni Ernst from Deep Red, Iowa, reportedly not seeking re-election. A Minnesota Republican candidate withdrawing with scathing condemnation of Trump's ICE operations as unconstitutional. And 3 Florida Republicans, including 20-year veteran, announcing retirements all within weeks of each other. The political implications could reshape the entire midterm landscape. Speaker Johnson's already razor-thin majority shrinking further before elections even happen. Republican recruitment suffering as potential candidates see longtime members fleeing. Fundraising potentially declining as donors question whether races are winnable. And Democrats gaining opportunities in districts that should be safe Republican territory, but become competitive due to Trump's declining approval and controversial policies. The retirements might represent systematic recognition among Republicans that Trump's presidency has become electoral liability they're unwilling to defend, that his policies are too unpopular, that his chaos is too exhausting, that association with him threatens political futures even in districts he won overwhelmingly. And if that recognition spreads, if more Republicans conclude that retiring beats campaigning for Trump, the midterm disasters the party fears could become self-fulfilling prophecy as they lose candidates, resources, and momentum. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because we're covering every new retirement announcement and what it reveals about Republican prospects. Every indication of whether pattern continues or stabilizes. Every way that losing members affects legislative capacity and midterm competitiveness. This could be a moment when Trump's hold on Republican Party starts cracking as members decide loyalty costs more than it's worth. And if the exodus continues, November could bring losses that make current retirements look prescient rather than premature. Stay tuned.